Alright, Portland Trail Blazers. We don't really talk about them primarily over the channel because they're not really much of a big market team to ever, talk about fondly when they've made consistent strides for postseason success. They have one of the best players in this generation, Damian Lillard, being the more, revolutionary guys to utilize a three-point shot that is not Steph Curry. Consistent scorer over the foul line, actually is a person that they built over around. And since 2013, they haven't got memorable draft picks. Justin Jackson, Rondé Hollis Jefferson, that then later on became a journeyman. Nasir Little, there's not much pushing over Nasir Little. Even his 3-point percentage is not that pushed, because he's a big guy. And Isaiah Stewart. There's not much to really perceive over those last few draft picks. Just absolutely weak. And even before Damian Lillard, Nolan Smith, Elliot Williams. They really haven't gotten anybody interesting since Greg Oden. Or if you want to be that older, not even Brandon Roy, because he wasn't in the first round. It's terrible. Their free agent signings, mediocre. The most you can pick that, actually produce well for the team is Joseph Nurkic and LaMarcus Aldridge. Myers Leonard. And possibly still CJ McCollum. That's been good, but never a 1-2 punch that's consistent, because even as good as McCollum is, he's third option at least. They never had a more memorable wing than when they had, I guess, a Carmelo Anthony at 33 years old. Carmelo Anthony that already had an issue pushing over the league when they had Wesley Matthews. It just nobody. Just nobody. The best they had a chance to even be a content team over opening night when they upset the LA Lakers. And pushing off with Steph Curry so they can actually get 3-point depth. The Trailblazers just never had good depth. Let's keep it a buck. They are literally the Western Conference version of the Charlotte Hornets before they drafted LaMelo Ball. Even though the Blazers had more postseason success, making it over a conference finals, but repeatedly losing to the first round, even in MVP caliber seasons Damian Lillard had over the past 7 seasons in the NBA. And I have nothing against Damian Lillard. I feel like he's a great player. And I think his last good individual season, you had to go back to 2019 or 2018. 24 points, 7.3 assists, with a field goal why only 32% from behind the line? He's playing weak out there. He hasn't. You have to go back to pedestrian numbers he had since 2014, and he was an all-star with only 21 points. For majority of the rest of his 6 career seasons, he's consistently dropped over 25 points. He's been absolutely abysmal trying to move over the ball, transition into a passing point guard, even though he's been more of a shooter. He just hasn't moved over the rim. Moved over his position to transition well with the new head coach. And now look at the Blazers. They're better off just trading away all their talent, seeing whatever they can push over for the market for Damian Lillard, especially over that massive contract. Because now the Blazers are in sub-purgatory levels of mediocrity with a 14-22 record in the Western Conference. Chauncey Billups, I love Chauncey Billups. Part of the 04 Pistons, upsetting the dominant Lakers. And Chauncey Billups had some decent years over in Denver. But Tony Snell, That guy was a rotation player for the Chicago Bulls when D Rose was still there. Greg Brown Jr., only person that I see shows out there. Robert Covington, Joseph Nurkic that hasn't played much, Larry Nance Jr., and Norman Powell. You think that screams a contender? The most you have is perceived small ball unless Nurkic breaks his fucking ankle. Just see over the last several games, dude. Dame been out. He's out for the game over abdominal. There's COVID there's safety protocols off the wazoo, and even if they had everybody 100%, the most they would have is like 2 wins more. And here's their January 3rd game, where at least they won by 5. Trae Young was playing, and he dropped 56, and they still won over Simon's one of the first round picks for the Blazers last year, dropping 43. It's obvious that they can draft decent, but they're just not They're just not a team willing to go all the way when it comes to getting major top of the line talent. When they should, if they're that much of a consistent playoff threat, and they're not even respectful to one of the best players they had for majority of the decade. That's kind of fucked up. And you know what's the worst part? This is possibly going to still continue. Even though Damian Lillard is now in his 30s. McCollum can't do much to perceivably help the offense. And they just don't have the bit. They just don't. Dennis Smith Jr.'s here. He came from the G League. And Frenny Simons, I hope he becomes a good player. I've seen games that he's performed, seems to do well moving up for a young, stretch forward. I want to see more off him. I don't know what else I can see over McCollum except what I expect. And possibly Larry Nance Jr., because I remember his years in LA. He had some cool highlights there. And of course, I guess, whatever the hell Tony Snell's doing, other than probably with a 10-day contract. But this is just it. I mean, I would suggest trade. Let the Blazers get a rest. You guys are not going to be a playoff contender this year. You guys don't have a legit team this year. And you have 2 prime players that should be winning championships off the decline, especially productively in how the league is going about it right now. Just give it a rest. Trade Lillard. Do something about McCollum and see if you can push over a decent deal for 2 first-round picks and a decent youth player to deal with. So you can build. Or rebuild over that case. Because this is obviously not what I'm, gotta expect more of. I'm just saying, people, this is just awful. Hopefully, I hope the Blazers learn something from this, because this is just off. And we're gonna talk about the Knicks too. They have won a few games recently. Not like it really matters. But that's just enough for me. Thanks for watching. And subscribe.